conference this year is protecting human lives and restoring economic stability. Given the sort of environment that we live in today, a declining economic growth, post-COVID times, we thought an appropriate title for our conference would be Protecting Human Lives and Trying to Restore Inclusive and Sustainable Economic Stability. Thank you all very much for joining. Mr. Rahul Chhabra, Pramod, Mr. Peter Rimmele, and we'll soon be joined by our G20 Sherpa, Shri Suresh Prabhuji. And unfortunately, His Excellency, the Sherpa from Saudi Arabia cannot join us, but he has given us a video address that we shall play at the appropriate time. I won't take too much time. Let me just introduce very quickly the theme of our conference, as well as what we intend to do over the next 4 days. On behalf of ICRIER, let me thank all our sponsors for this event, which includes the International Monetary Fund, IMF, ADBI in Tokyo, that's the Asian Development Bank Institute, and of course, Peter Rimmele and Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, the India office. Many of you would know that ICRIER has been organizing these conferences for the last 12 years. This is our 12th international conference, and these have been typically organized prior to the G20 summit. This is the first time we are conducting this online and virtually, and hopefully by this time next year, we should be back to our traditional face-to-face interaction. The discussions in these conferences have provided a platform for enriching discussions amongst researchers, academicians, policymakers, and they have been of relevance to the G20 summit. And I hope that this year we will repeat what we have been achieving in our G20 conferences. We met in May last year prior to the G20 summit in Osaka. This year, as you know, Saudi Arabia holds the presidency, and the theme of their G20 presidency is realizing opportunities for the 21st century for all. The theme, therefore, reflects a very inclusive agenda, and therefore our theme as well in ICRIER's G20 conference is also an inclusive and sustainable agenda, as I said, protecting human lives and restoring economic stability. We will have 5 sessions during the course of the next 4 days, and we shall have a G20 address. The sessions are global financial architecture, issues in trade and investment, global health concerns, which have become paramount in these times. Then we will be talking about financial stability in the G20 address that will be given by Rajat. We will be talking about sustainable development, contributions to the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals agenda. And then we shall look ahead to the Italian presidency and draw lessons from the Japanese presidency, as well as what Saudi Arabia is doing right now. So that would be the Troika session. That will be the final session of the conference. As you know, India will be joining the Troika in less than 2 months from now, as it prepares to host the presidency in 2022. Therefore, it is even more important that we begin an engagement right now with all stakeholders, including civil society, including businesses, think tanks, academics, policymakers, so that we can create a sharp focus on what our agenda and what our influence would be in our presidency in 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has engulfed the entire world, and of course has taken a big toll on the population, has taken a big toll on economic growth, and has had a devastating effect both on life as well as on economies. In such a situation, it becomes really easy that globalization becomes a target and becomes a victim, because countries begin to look inwards. And I think a lot of us think in ICRIER that it is at this time we need collective action much more. We need to come together, and given the global situations, we need to tackle these challenges together and not independently. And therefore, the theme of our conference is an inclusive and sustainable agenda. Deglobalization has happened many times in the past, but globalization has prevailed. And I hope, and we hope this time as well, that the disturbances that we see in the global economic environment, in the geopolitical environment, in the geostrategic environment, will eventually give way to more reasoned and enlightened global cooperation and global cooperation. This has been an unfortunate year for many reasons, not only because of the pandemic, but due to declining economic growth. And in ICRIER, it has even been more devastating for us because, as someone said in the introduction when we were just chatting, that our former chairperson, Ishar Judge Ahluwalia, passed away last week, and this has been terrible news for us. She was a presence in all our G20 conferences and would speak at our events. And she was somebody who had charm, who had grace, who had scholarship, who had wisdom. And we will miss her. And we will continue to celebrate her life through our research and through our actions in ICRIER. I can think of no one better to fill Ishar's big shoes than Pramod Bhasin, who has been a member of our board of governors and now is the chairperson, and who will be giving us the welcome address. Just a very brief introduction to Pramod. All the CVs for the interest of the participants and panelists, all the CVs are at our special G20 portal that is linked to our website. So please go and have a look at the agenda as well as the CVs. But let me also say that how proud we are that Pramod Bhasin accepted to become the chair of ICRIER. He was the former president and CEO of GE Capital, India and Asia, where he established the financial services business. He's the founder of Genpact, and he founded Genpact in 1996. And to all purposes, he is the pioneer of India's booming business process industry in India. Under him, the organization grew to be a global entity that spanned over 20 countries and employed more than 80,000 people. He is on the board of several organizations, but I think he is the chair of ICRIER, and I warmly welcome Pramod to this position. He's been chair for some time, but this is his first G20 conference that he will be speaking in, and I warmly welcome Pramod to this event. While some of you present here would have attended our previous conferences, there are several others who would be participating for the first time, and I know that Mr. Rahul Chhabra also is participating in this for the first time, as is Peter Rimmele, although Mr. Suresh Prabhu has been at our G20 events earlier, has inaugurated them, and we will warmly welcome him once more. He is truly an architect of economic reforms in India. A very warm welcome to all of you, and I do hope that all of you have a rich and productive conference. As I said, we have Suresh Prabhuji. We also have His Excellency Dr. Fahad Almubarak, who is the Sherpa of Saudi Arabia's G20 presidency. But unfortunately, due to some pressing engagement, he is not able to join us today. But he has given us a special video address that we shall play at the appropriate time. Peter Rimmele, welcome to the conference as well. May I now invite Mr. Pramod Bhasin, Chairman of ICRIER, to give his welcome address. Pramod, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajat. Thank you very much indeed for your very kind remarks. And my very warm welcome to all the participants to this extremely critical conference. These are devastating times for all of us, and the fact that we're having to do this virtually and lack the intimacy that would come and the interaction that would come from being in person can be overcome to some extent, but it is a reflection of the times and the era that we live in. I am uniquely and distinctly privileged to be the chairperson of ICRIER. I cannot begin to fill Ishar's shoes. She was an astonishing lady, a wonderful lady, and I do want to make sure we remember that part, because I really think everybody at ICRIER, and I hope everybody at the conference, will miss her charisma, her fantastic ability to do research, and her clear and crisp thinking. I used to call her a force of nature because there was nothing that could stand in her path once she got going. And we really, really miss her terribly. It's really only been 6 months, And it's the vulnerability of human life that it gets reflected here so vividly. And I hope we will make ICRIER and this conference into a bigger theme every year and expand it. It comes at a very, very critical time. We all know that. I speak, if I may, not just for ICRIER, but also as a business person. For ICRIER, this cannot come at a more important time. And for the participants here, we are grateful for their presence, because India will become the president of this, of the G20 in 2022, and as such can play a critical role. I know that today the Royal Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is in that position. We look forward to the representations from them later on by video, as Rajat was saying. But I wanted to touch on a few themes and some of the subtopics that have been addressed for this conference, which are particularly relevant. You know, as the world grapples with the direct and indirect effects of the coronavirus disease, this COVID-19 thing that has shattered human lives across the world in an unprecedented way, our economic outlook remains extraordinarily grim, not just in India, but in many, many other countries. Those countries that can afford fantastic fiscal stimuli are doing well, and yet the human cost of this is still not written up. We still don't know what it's like, and only history will truly tell us the entire human cost, not just in economic terms, but in terms of social fabric, children's education, and everything else that comes with it. The IMF has projected that in 2020, emerging markets and developing economies will contract by 3%. Indian economy is projected to contract by 4.5%. I personally believe these numbers are probably underwhelmed. We haven't begun to count the cost of all the unorganized markets, the smaller businesses, not just in India, but across the world, that have been severely impacted by what has been happening. COVID-19 is a human crisis and a health crisis. What is amply clear to us that the way we have approached health and the industry of health across the world is sorely inadequate. There is no amount of hospitals and doctors that can truly take care of the healthcare needs of large populations, particularly in the poorer countries. We simply cannot produce adequate number of doctors and nurses and hospitals and infrastructure to achieve what we need to do. In all countries, perhaps, even the developed countries. There may be a few countries which do this remarkably well and better than most, but even those countries have their aches and pains and worry about the healthcare crisis that is going to engulf them, as we have seen. The choice, therefore, we have is to rethink how we tackle healthcare crisis, particularly with the use of technology. Technology is the only way we're going to be able to reach all those people who live in remote, faraway places without the requisite infrastructure, who need medicine, who need diagnostic care, who need doctors to look at them without necessarily being able to go and touch and feel them. To find ways to actually be able to work within those frameworks, only information technology, I believe, will be able to truly solve. And I hope all of us, as part of the G20 and as part of this conference, will think about that, because the role of health and telehealth and all the other practices that go with it will become sharper into focus, because we have no other option at this point in time but to significantly accelerate all of the circumstances and all of the innovation that we need. An interesting fact brought out by some of the key doctors in India that I was talking to at the time of COVID was very simply that 90% of healthcare needs don't even come to the hospital. And therefore, if you want to solve for them, we have to find new and different ways. International trade needs another new coordinated response. Rajat, as you said, the world is turning inwards. It is a natural protection and insecurity that comes from a time of crisis. And as we see in election results around the world, increasingly, there is a sense of wanting to stay within your own boundaries and rely on yourself much more. This is totally understandable and explainable. And yet, we all know our economic lessons that this is not tenable and will not work in the longer term. We have to find ways, and I hope as part of this conference we get into thorough discussions on these, and I'm sure we will, we have to find ways, policies, and innovations, as well as practical down-to-earth solutions for areas that are deeply affected by the disruption of supply chains and the disruption of manufacturing across the world. For sustainability, where I believe we have a much larger role to play and where so much more needs to be done, I have a couple of thoughts. Business is very much divorced from its environment today. I'm saying that as a business person. At the end of the day, I believe businesses have a long ways to go and must be encouraged to make the changes they need to achieve the goals of sustainability that are actually accelerating on us, because we're already seeing the impact of climate change all around us, from fires in California to the spread of disease, to the fact that India has suffered so many different catastrophes as a result of this. And yet, I can say as a business, I can ask the question, are we doing enough? And my proposal, and I hope we will think about a few things in this conference. One of the things I have often believed for a long time is a life cycle rating for products. I wish the world and all of us could come together to provide a life cycle rating for all products that we buy and consume in any fashion, which talk about the life cycle, recyclability of products, talk about what goes into them, and makes all of us think about what we consume and how we consume it. Similar ratings for industries would be extremely valuable for people to think about as they support those companies, as they watch those companies change over time, as investors and banks think about investing, as shareholders think about it. And if we can bring some of these facets in and make them more concrete for the average public so that they understand how they can contribute to this entire drive for sustainability, that would be extraordinary. There are two examples I would love to share, love everyone to think about. One is the CSR example, where in India we have passed a law which says that 2% of profits will go to CSR contribution from every company. I must tell you, I was a rebel. I didn't like the law when it was passed, and I wrote against it. But today, in fact, it comes as an extra tax, but it has revived the entire CSR area and has made many companies think seriously about contributing a lot more than they have in the past. That has been a wonderful change. And now we're beginning to see governments and major investors such as BlackRock, like the government of New Zealand, which has recently come out with an announcement asking banks to provide a climate risk rating for their own companies to think about the risks they're taking on from climate change, starting within the next few years. As we calibrate, as we provide these ratings, as we think about how we think about sustainability within every company, I hope we can accelerate the pace of change with which we are working today. It gives me great pleasure to know that the ICRIER conference is able to bring together international leadership, experts from all over the world, from IMF, WTO, WHO, top universities and institutes. It is a wonderful collection of people, and I really hope we can reflect on the need for worldwide global cooperation at a time when the world seems to be moving apart. It also gives me great pleasure to welcome the Indian Sherpa, Shri Suresh Prabhu, who I can see on the screen, who has joined us, as well as, of course, the video conference that we will see from His Excellency, Dr. Fahad Almubarak, who couldn't join us today. And I welcome all the other participants and the attendees who have shown such great interest in our conference. And I really hope you enjoy and participate in it as well as everybody can in these very interesting times, which I also hope at some point in time, we can see a light at the end of this tunnel and get back to normal lives, which we are all waiting to do. Rajat, with that, may I turn it back to you? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pramod. I think you've set the tone for the conference. Your remarks on the health and the use of technology to sort of overcome the health deficits that we have, especially in emerging markets. We need to increase health expenditure, to need to have more hospitals. In India, our social sector expenditure, both on health and education, has been less than optimal. And I think this crisis points to that, to increasing the expenditure in social and health infrastructure. Especially, we also need to look at trade, sustainability of global value chains, and of course, sustainability and environment. And as you said so clearly, that businesses now need to take more responsibility and need to adhere to standards. Maybe it will happen through regulation, maybe it will happen through self-regulation, but I think it is extremely important if the world is to achieve sustainability, then both governments as well as businesses have a role to play. Governments, of course, have a role to play in creating regulation and enforcing regulation, and businesses have a role to play in compliances. So thank you very much, Pramod, for those insightful remarks. It is my absolute pleasure to now invite India's G20 as well as G7 Sherpa, Shri Suresh Prabhuji, who has been such a kind and gracious supporter of ICRIER and a great friend to me personally. I've always enjoyed interacting with Shri Suresh Prabhuji, and it sort of amazes me at the depth and the vastness and the magnitude of his presentations that he has been making, not only in ICRIER, but at several other platforms. As I said, I don't need to introduce him. All of you know him, but let me just say that, he's, apart from being the G7 and G20 Sherpa, handpicked by the leadership of the country, let me also say that he's held cabinet portfolios in India of very important nature, the civil aviation, railways, and commerce and industry. And in each of these portfolios, Suresh Prabhuji has left an indelible mark. And he's a champion of reforms. That's the best way I think I can describe him, as a champion of economic reform, so that India can engage and influence the process of globalization. And today, I'm sure that he'll be able to help us understand how India is going to engage not only in the Saudi and Italian presidency, but how we will shape up in the G20 presidency when our turn comes in 2022. Suresh Prabhuji, it's a delight to have you, and I can't help but remember how much you supported ICRIER when we were working at the report of decarbonization when you were Minister of Railways. You did a lot of things in the railways, like electrification, solar panels on platforms that went a long way, that are going a long way in helping trying to achieve decarbonization. And you have similar reform initiatives in other ministries. So really thank you for all that you're doing for India, all that you're doing for our presidency, and really a warm welcome to ICRIER's platform. Over to you, Suresh Prabhuji. You're mute. You're mute.
Yes, I think, so thank you, Rajat. Thank you, Bhasin Saab. And I can see very clearly my dear friend and colleague, and who has admirably served India in several capacities as a very seasoned diplomat. And my real good family friend, Rahul Chhabra, is here. And I'm very happy that he's holding such an important position in the government, because he is a diplomat, so he can put diplomacy to proper use to promote economic relationship. So that is what he's doing, and I'm very happy that he's here. So I'm sure he will enlighten this process very much. And my dear friend Peter, who is stuck in Germany, far away from here, but I know where his heart is. His heart is here and his body is in Germany. So Peter is also here, and I'm very happy that all of you are here. And I'm sure Huda Saab, Anwar Huda will be joining us, as well as there will be so many others who actually always attend this program, because I have done this quite a few times in the past under the banner of ICRIER on way to the G20 leaders meet in quite a few times, because I was holding this position even in 2014. And before I became railway minister, and while I was railway minister, I was also holding this dual responsibility. So I would very happy that I'm sure there will be so many excellencies from different countries will be actually tuned in. So I welcome all of them and thank each one of them. Very important, I think Rajat wants me to speak on Road to 2022. I think I will put it in a little lighter way that all roads to future are fraught with uncertainty. In fact, there has never been a time when even astrologers will be putting to serious stress to understand how the future is going to unfold. And in fact, just a few months ago, if anybody had said that we'll be doing program like this through such medium, people would have laughed at them. In fact, I remember as a railway minister, I started first time that all programs I should do it on online like this, because railway had a very important organization called Railtel, which had a very good OFC network all over. So I started doing this program. So I was sitting in Delhi and do 20, 30 programs in different parts of the country, where the chief minister will attend there, and I will be doing it from Delhi. So people used to be laughing at me. How can you do like this? You should be physically coming there. But now today, that time I was doing it out of not compulsion, but out of choice. Today I'm doing out of compulsion. This is how the world has changed. And therefore, 2022, I hope, will be a much better year than 2020, which everybody is hoping should pass as early as possible. But of course, I must put on record genuinely my sincere appreciation of the great work done by Saudi presidency in the most difficult times, most unprecedented times. In fact, my dear friend, who is my counterpart and who is a minister in Saudi government, very seasoned civil servant, he was a central bank governor and a very good person, has put in so much of effort along with all his colleagues led by His Highness Crown Prince, who actually made such an effort, and unfortunately, despite all this, and without any of their fault and without beyond anybody's control, will be holding this presidency on a virtual basis in the next few weeks. But they put it a great job, and I'm sure my dear friends in Italy will take it forward and do even a better job. So therefore, we'll be carrying the burden in 2022 of having such great hostings in the past by such great presidencies. So we'll be obviously be looking and learning from them, and we'll be hosting it at a time when India would be celebrating the 75th year of its independence. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been extremely forthcoming in this regard to say that we will like to host this presidency. Definitely, it's a responsibility, but we like to do it for the better of the world. For not only for the G20 members countries, but probably for those countries who are not part of G20, but are part of the world. They are part of the humanity. And therefore, we like to work on that basis. And when I say humanity, I think that's where India G20 presidency's priority would be. How to bring in human-centric development. Last several decades, we have struggled with the world with different models. We thought this one particular model is going to solve all the problems of the world. Till 2008 happened when economic model was questioned. And then, despite practicing market-based economies, the most important countries, OECD countries, had to put in their public money to save private banks. Rightly so. I'm not disputing that. But that also what put a question mark on purely market-based model, laissez-faire, in which will not interfere, but we had to intervene. Rightly so. That means there is no such one model which can be virtually available for all times to come. Then recently, beginning of the year, we had this coronavirus, which again put focus on public health. Because till that time we are thinking people are now better off. They can take care of their own health. Probably like Chile came out with a very interesting model that even the pension fund was privatized. Therefore, we felt that this will solve all the problems. But then in Chile, there is challenge because that one of the best models, not just in Latin America, but probably people are thinking as a model which is be always cited by even multilateral institutions as a model to be followed by other countries. But that model is under question mark in their own country. And then public health has put focus back on where it should be, that people's health is not just people's responsibility, but larger responsibility of the government. It should be part of public policy. And that hopefully by 2022 the pandemic would have gone, but focus on public health should not go. It should remain. And therefore, in 2022, the human-centric development should be the priority of the world. Not just 22, but 22 onwards. It should be the priority of the world. That development is not just adding numbers to GDP. But development should mean that people of the world must actually benefit, and they feel that they are benefited. It is not just we say that we are benefited, but people themselves must experience that they are benefited. Therefore, there is no need for the government to tell them that you are benefited, because they would have experienced it themselves. And that people-centric development model obviously will bring in different connotations. One, economic development, because you cannot have development without economic output coming in, which will result into incomes of the people going up, resources available to the governments to put it back into much needed infrastructure or public health related issues. But so economic development has to happen. In fact, 2008 was a reminder that economic development come to a standstill at that time because of banking crisis and now because of public health crisis. But economy over a period of time, whether we may question globalization in whatever form it is, but as Bhasin was mentioning, the global economy is interconnected, whether you like it or not. And now it's very difficult to disentangle from it. And it may be to our individual country's peril that if we say that we want to live in isolation, and we don't want to get connected to others, because the point he mentioned is the global value chains, which have become so integral. It is like, can I say that my heart will function and I will disconnect all the veins which leads to my heart. If you can do that, that's fantastic. I hope some doctors, some cardiologists will come out with some model which can actually make heart function, but will not let the veins bring the blood and take the purified blood back to the rest of the body. It is possible, fantastic. But if it is not possible, at least I'm not a medical doctor, I am a chartered accountant, but still, if it is possible, in real economic life, it is not possible anymore because everything is connected. So we'll have to make sure that we reinforce and make this value chain benefit people. So it's not that the global value chains are perfect today, but they are inevitable. And if they are inevitable and not perfect, then what's the best way to do? Make it perfect, make it better. And that is should be the focus from people-centric development point of view. And that should be the economic activity, and that should be the focus of that. The second aspect of people-centric, the people all over the world are literally crying to say that please don't spoil my basic right of clean air, clean water, oceans, land. In fact, I must compliment my friends in Saudi Arabia when they said that land degradation should be one of the priority, because that's one of the important issue. And to solve all this, luckily, there is an all-encompassing issue. If you address that, probably we'll address all the underlying environmental concern. That's climate change. If you can address climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emission, to do all this, you'll have to work on water, because water is not, it is adaptation issue, because as a result of climate change, water issues will happen. Agriculture, which cannot be done without water, and agriculture will be affected for both ends because water resources will be under stress. On the other hand, rising temperatures would make such varieties of agriculture products completely unsustainable. And therefore, if you take all these issues related to environment and climate change together, and they have to be together, people will be happy. That's what they want. The Africans are wondering why my crop is not as good as it should be during my great-grandfather's time. The fishermen in North America are wondering why my catch is not as good as my great-great-grandfather used to get. And all of these are related to climate change. Why the west coast of US is burning today. And millions of hectares of land is completely, forest is completely destroyed. And when we talk about the fires in Amazon, what about the damage that is caused by fires in even on west coast? Because environment is the same, air is the same, sky is the same, sky is related to one another. And therefore, we'll have to think about all these issues from people's perspective. So no longer climate change is a political game in which we keep sending shuttle from here and now ball is in your court or shuttle is in your court. No longer. We must address it. And COPs can be postponed now. In fact, the UK was going to host it. I hope they're able to do it in some form or the other. But the COPs are chasing a culprit without catching him. So COP is what we call it in committee of parties which meet regularly. I'm talking about COP as a police. That COP should catch somebody. That's the job of a COP. So these COPs are not catching the real culprit, that's climate change. And therefore COPs are meeting year after year without catching the culprit that's addressing the challenge. And that's why we really need to work on that effectively. And that's why we feel the people-centric development should be based on that. Other aspect of people-centric development will be that human beings, we always call them as social animals. And when I talk about, just to mention this point, when we talk about environment, climate change, oceans are very important. I'm very happy that G7 actually focused on oceans. In Biarritz meet, I was happy that they have taken oceans because they are the really environment's last resort. Because if oceans raise their hands, then everybody's gone. They are the carbon sinks. They have a huge marine biodiversity. If we lose that, then we are gone, completely gone. Today also we are gone to great extent because destroyed terrestrial biodiversity a great deal. But once that's gone, is gone. So the other aspect of people-centric development will be the social issues. Inequality in the world is worrying. Even in the most developed economies of the world, I'm not saying all, but some important, most developed economies of the world, most of the people who are employed, they live from paycheck to paycheck. There's no savings, and that also displayed in their macro level when their country's savings rate is abysmally low. What does it mean? That while the economies are the largest and the biggest and the best, what about the people there? They are not having any savings. So when you say that you save for a rainy day, but forget it's not a rainy day, but when it is shining day, you have nothing in your pocket. So how can you survive? And therefore, human-centric development must encompass the issues related to society, people, reduce social inequality, because that's another problem. If I don't have money in my pocket, somewhere I can adjust. But when I see somebody else having billions of dollars, and these billions of dollars keep increasing without doing anything because the stock market takes it at a higher level, and that in turn adds to the GDP of the country. So that's another very interesting thing, that he sees the GDP numbers rising, but when he's not benefiting from it. So social inequality will be a very important issue that we'll have to deal with. And in that, the economic offenses, which are very important, which Prime Minister Modi has been articulating very strongly, that economic offenders are actually speaking, committing crime, not just in the statute book of the country, but against the society as a whole. Because that deprives the common people of their legitimate earnings, legitimate rights on the public finances. And therefore, such actions should also be properly addressed. It should be dealt with. And to some people-centric issues will be, why not world think about developing major infrastructure projects in whatever country you can. By doing that, the whole economy of the world will benefit, because we talked about supply chains. Supply chains are not only for manufacturing. The value chains are not just for services. There is a more integrated chains related to infrastructure. When you develop infrastructure in one country, some other country contributes to it, maybe by designing, maybe by ensuring, maybe by providing materials, maybe by sending labor. So world will benefit as a whole when we make large infrastructure projects available in the world. And also at a time, I hope 2022 would return to some normalcy. But today, there is so much of liquidity in the market at such low cost. Now even the US, the largest economy, is probably will release another important package for the economy, which could be probably more than $2 trillion. And that is more than 95% of the world's economies, the $2 trillion itself. There are not many economies which have got, not even 7 economies, which have more GDP than $2 trillion. So that is the amount of money that is going to come into the market, already come into the market, and at so low cost, thanks to the central banks of those countries, reducing, making the monetary policy in such a way that the money is available at cheap cost. Why not put that money into infrastructure of the world, which will benefit everybody, including India? But I'm not saying only India will benefit, that's why it should be done. India would obviously be beneficiary in one extent, but also contributing to the economic growth for others who are working and waiting to find out where to deploy these resources. Because deploying resources also earns better earning for them, better returns for them, which in turn will benefit them. So it's mutually beneficial. And therefore, we should have this as a very important element of growth. Interestingly, though global governance should be a very important issue that world must debate and not delay anymore. Take action. Just imagine the multilateral platforms are under threat. The countries are deliberately undermining some of these very important institutions of the world, who are actually the mainstay of the global economy and the global integration. And if those institutions disappear or made completely ineffective, which should not be the aim of anybody, what would happen to the world? And that brings a global governance issue. And therefore, I think we should very importantly focus our attention on global governance for people's good. People-centric development can lead to the world growing faster and can eliminate all those associated challenges that we are facing today, because we never focused on people themselves, but we thought about development as something which is independent of people. And that will be extremely important from our perspective, and we should try to focus on it. As I said, India becomes part of Troika in the next few weeks, or less than few weeks actually. And once we become part of Troika, we'll continue to be in that role for 3 years. In 2020, end of 20, 21, 22. And therefore, as Troika, we like to play a key role into working on all these social, economic, environmental issues, as well as governance issues, together with our partners, with our friends, with our colleagues, with our allies. And for India, I think all the members of United Nations and aspiring members of United Nations are all our friends to work together to ensure that we must work on addressing the challenges which are now cause of a problem in the world today. And at least G20 should be the forum, if not others which are actually not becoming as relevant and as effective as they should be, to take this process forward of people-centric development. I think we have some very distinguished people. Hamare Anwarul Huda Sahab is also here, who will be very distinguished economist as well as thinker. I have got great regard for him. And therefore, I think when such distinguished people are there, I am a person out of place into this, odd man out. So rather I should be leaving, if not a floor, but a screen for such great people to participate. And as I said at the beginning, my dear friend Rahul will really provide real good key inputs about what India would be doing, India is already doing. And as I said, economic diplomacy is becoming very important tool for engaging with the rest of the world. Because ultimately, end of the world, every other country wants that how I am going to benefit from engagement with you. So, there are issues which are important, but most important issue for any country in the world is that how can I make faster economic development? And that's why economic diplomacy will be key role. Therefore, I thank our Honorable Prime Minister for finding the best person to work on that. And that's my dear friend Rahul Chhabra, who will be speaking and will be talk about it. I've seen his work as ambassadors in such important geographies. And very quietly, he's been working and very effectively, of course, at the same time. I really wish to offer you my best wishes. And Huda Sahab, unfortunately, I'm going to miss your discourse today, but I'm sure I can go through the YouTube and go through it because I have some other program which is waiting for me. I have got many creditors, so I have to keep allocating my limited time on each one of them. So they keep waiting in the wings, telling them, please come, please come. Like the creator keeps saying, when are you paying me? Don't pay others, but pay me first. So that's what I have to go and pay my debt to them. So I will be leaving this screen. But thank you very much. And again, I must put on record the great contribution of ICRIER into enhancing this process of engaging with the rest of the world economically. And Rajat has been doing a fantastic job for so many years. I'm sure under the new leadership of Pramod Bhasin, that process will be further accelerated and taken to the new level. So all the best to you. And always remember that I am always available to you at any time to not to enrich the process because I cannot do that, but at least participate into this deliberation. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Suresh Prabhuji. It's always such a pleasure to have you on ICRIER's platform, and you've been such a gracious supporter, as I said, of our events. And as you offered, we'll take you up on your offer. I mean, what you have spoken, I'm constantly amazed at the range and the depth of your interventions, and you have lived up to that promise. So thank you very much. And you have really set the tone, like Pramod did, for our conference, because we called our conference Protecting Human Lives and Restoring Economic Stability. And that's exactly what you have said. We need to focus on human-centric development. Somewhere along the way, as the process of globalization was happening and it was intensifying, I think the focus on people was lost, and we were looking at economic development for its own sake. Now we have to look at economic development. As you say, it is necessary. Governments need money, you need growth for jobs, but you have to put people at the center. And I think that's extremely important. And your two metaphors about global value chains and the heart and climate change and COPs and catching the right people, I think they are very evocative. And thank you very much. As always, I really enjoyed your presentation. And what you also said about, India's presidency celebrating its 75th years of independence in 2022, and therefore championing a cause for a better globalization, for a more human-centric globalization. And I hope we can, with your leadership and with the Prime Minister's leadership, I hope we can continue to influence that process and get a lot more people involved, a lot more countries involved, and also the United Nations. And hopefully we can play a better and a more influential role from within the United Nations as well. You also made another point, which I have personally also been recognized and appreciated, which is the sort of quality of the Saudi Arabian G20 engagement. I think the quality of their papers, the quality of the engagement, the quality of what they have done, the virtual events that they have had, I think I am really greatly appreciated the role that G20 from Saudi Arabia has played. And anybody who hasn't gone to their website and looked at the papers, I would encourage all of you, as Suresh Prabhuji was saying, that they have made the best of a really bad situation. And despite having to conduct everything virtually, I think they have done tremendously. And as I said, I urge all of you to have a look at the quality of the papers that they have produced in so many diverse fields. I've really enjoyed reading some of the output that has come out. And I hope some of you can see that. And ICRIER and some of our researchers have contributed to that process as well. It is now my pleasure and honor to introduce to you His Excellency Dr. Fahad Almubarak, who, as Suresh was saying, is the G20 Sherpa for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And as I said in my introductory remarks, unfortunately, he has been called away for an important meeting which conflicts, but he has been gracious enough to give us a video address. I think Suresh Prabhuji introduced him already and said that he, apart from being the G20 Sherpa, he's held several other influential posts in Saudi Arabia. And I would encourage all of you to go to our website and see the role that he has played, not only in Saudi Arabia's presidency, but also in his life as a professional, as a minister in the Saudi Arabian government. He had held several executive positions in both government and the private sector. As Suresh ji was saying, he's governor of the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority from 2011 to 2016. He's a member of the Shura Council, chairman and managing director of Morgan Stanley Saudi Arabia from 2005 to 2011. And he was the first chairperson of Saudi Stock Exchange. He started his career as a professor at King Fahad University of Petroleum and Minerals. He has served as chairman and member in many private and public companies, and it is our privilege to welcome His Excellency Mr. Almubarak. Unfortunately, as I said, he's not here in person, but we will be happy to hear his video address. Thank you for doing this. Over to Rajkumar. Could you please play the video address?
Esteemed delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I'm very delighted to be with you today. I'm also very happy to be speaking in this session with my very good friend and partner in the G20, whom I had the honor of working with closely, His Excellency Suresh Prabhu. I would like to begin by thanking the ICRIER for organizing this timely and important conference on protecting human lives and restoring economic stability. I specifically like to thank the director, Dr. Kathuria, for inviting me to join this important conference. As you all know, the G20 is the premier global forum for international cooperation, has been since its inception, uniting the largest economies in the world to overcome economic crisis, a forum to find global solution for global challenges. Only through our continuous cooperation and collaboration can government find solution to crisis, including the unfortunate one we are in. The COVID-19 pandemic clearly demonstrated how interrelated the world is. Decades of goods, services, capital, and data flows across border have increased our interconnectedness and our interdependence. No country or region can solve this challenge in its own. Global challenges require global solutions. We win by working together, sharing ideas and experience, and taking concrete, coordinated action, which relates to the objectives of this conference. We win when we all safe. We win when we all cooperate together. Throughout the past decades, we have been through several challenges and crises and came out even stronger and more resilient. Just as the global challenges are becoming more pressing and require a spirit of trust and global cooperation to address them, our willingness and ability to undertake collective action needs to be stronger than ever now to solve the global challenges facing us. And this is where the G20 has a key role to play. The Saudi G20 presidency have developed this year agenda with forward-looking lens, focusing on addressing global challenges under the theme of realizing opportunities of the 21st century for all countries, all people. Under this theme, we focus on three aims that require global cooperation. First, empowering people by ensuring access to opportunities for all people, where all people can live, work, and thrive, while prioritizing issues related to women and the young. The second is safeguarding the planet by creating a sustainable framework to promote sustainable growth while conserving our natural resources. And the third is shaping new frontiers by harnessing the benefits of digital technology, boosting the opportunities, and ensuring a better connected world. However, when the COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, we had to tackle this urgent and unprecedented challenge. Therefore, in response to that, the custodian of the two holy mosques, King of Saudi Arabia, King Salman bin Abdulaziz, swiftly called for virtual extraordinary leader summit back in March 26 this year, where G20 leaders agreed in spirit of global solidarity to do whatever it takes to overcome the pandemic. A series of important commitments were taken to address the health, economic, and social impact of the pandemic. So far, G20 has led the fight against this common threat, taking immediate action to protect lives, livelihoods, economies, and the most vulnerable. Let me highlight 4 outcomes from the extraordinary meeting of the leaders. G20 countries have collectively injected an unprecedented stimulus of over $11 trillion into the global economy. Number 2, it pledged over $21 billion to support the development and distribution of vaccines for the COVID-19, where Saudi Arabia have contributed $500 million to this. Third, launched a debt relief initiative that will allow 73 eligible countries to reallocate over $20 billion toward their imminent health and financial crisis. Number 4, committed to ensure the flow of vital medical supplies and critical agricultural products across borders. Now, as we approach the Leaders Summit next November, the G20 and global cooperation are at a crossroad. We have a unique opportunity to make difference and collectively address our common challenges. The G20 presidency, G20 summit will have a strong overreaching focus on protecting lives and livelihoods, restoring growth and recovering stronger. In particular, we will be focusing on rising to the challenge together and taking immediate actions to combat this pandemic, such as ensuring universal and equitable access to vaccine. Empowering people by ensuring an inclusive recovery that tackles inequality through fostering resilience and recovery in healthcare, prevention, renewing the focus on education, social protection, and jobs, while also prioritizing, as I said earlier, issues related to women and the young. Safeguarding our planet is another theme that we want to achieve the upcoming summit, and ensuring sustainability, which is at the heart of the recovery. The Saudi presidency of G20 has initially put forward an ambitious agenda aimed at safeguarding our planet. So the leaders will have the opportunity to discuss how to build a more sustainable recovery. Building a resilience and long-lasting recovery, ensuring strong foundation for the future by harnessing the benefits of digital technology, sustaining trade cooperation, and ensuring better connected world. In closing, I would like to share with you that we will continue our efforts in collaboration with our partners in the G20 to promote and facilitate further cooperation, to ensure the protection of lives and livelihoods of people around the world, safeguard economies, and recover stronger in an inclusive, sustainable, and resilient manner. The G20 will continue to act decisively on 2 fronts, tackling the crisis and laying the foundations for a better future. More than ever, we need to look beyond our borders and unite in joint global efforts. The wheels of global cooperation should not stop. The G20 presidency is a great responsibility that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has taken with pride, humility, and strong determination to achieve strong, lasting results. The unprecedented health and economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic have made the task of leading the G20 this year even more challenging. But with the support of G20 nations and the broader international community, we are confident that the Riyadh Summit will deliver very positive outcomes that will restore hope to the people of the world. We will strive to overcome the pandemic and set the course for a better future that realizes the opportunities of the 21st century for all. With your support, we are confident that we will be able to deliver strong commitment at the G20 Leaders Summit in November. Thank you very much, and we wish you a very successful 12th anniversary summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, even though you could not be here in person. Thank you so much for the video address. And let me say that, as you said, Saudi Arabia has taken on the responsibility of the G20 with humility. And let me also say that you have shouldered this responsibility admirably. And congratulations, Your Excellency, for the work that you have done, as Suresh ji was also saying. And I think I must reinforce that so far, Saudi Arabia has done an incredible job at handling the G20 presidency. And we wish you all the best for the summit that is forthcoming in November. You've made really important points. As you said, the Saudi Arabian sort of theme is realizing opportunities for all. And you've continuously reiterated in your address the need to have opportunities for everybody, an inclusive agenda. And you pointed at least twice in your address the need to have not only an inclusive agenda, but also a gender-balanced agenda. And I think that is really a welcome step. You also pointed on the need for climate action, sustainability, and resiliency. And also, I think at the background, running through your address was the theme of global cooperation. And I think you summed it up really well when you said that we win when we work together. And I hope we can continue to do that. So congratulations once again, and all the best for your Leaders Summit in November. It is my great pleasure now to invite to give a special address on India's engagement in the G20 process by Shri Rahul Chhabra, Secretary, Economic Relations, Ministry of External Affairs. Suresh ji has already introduced him and the great work that Mr. Rahul Chhabra has done. Let me just also say that he took over this position as the post of Secretary, Economic Relations at MEA in June this year. So he's relatively new to this job, but I think abound experience that he has in handling diplomacy. He's been ambassador and high commissioner to several countries, to Kenya, to Somalia, permanent representative to the United Nations Environment Program and the United Nations Human Settlement Program. And he was based in Nairobi from November 2018 to June 2020. He was ambassador to Hungary and Bosnia and Herzegovina from August 2015 to October 2018. He worked as joint secretary in Delhi in Central Europe. He conceived and organized the first two editions of the India Central Europe Business Forum, which has now become a regular feature in India's business calendar. He was instrumental during this engagement in focusing India's foreign policy towards the Arctic and the V4. He earlier served in New Delhi to promote foreign investment flows in India and has been part of India's delegation to the World Economic Forum at Davos. He served as Director for External Publicity at the Ministry of External Affairs and Director in the Foreign Secretary's Office. He has served, as I said, in Kenya, in Hungary, in China, United States, Philippines, France, Senegal, and Belgium. And sort of wonderful, wide-ranging experience. And as Suresh ji also said, that he's also a brilliant academic. He's from St. Stephen's College, was on the merit list at the college, and then at Delhi University, he graduated in economics with a national scholarship, and then did his master's at the IIM Calcutta. So, you know, no one better, Mr. Chhabra, for you to give us special address. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And welcome to ICRIER's platform for the first time. And I hope this is the first of many engagements that we will have with you. Thank you, Mr. Chhabra.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Rajat, for those very warm words of welcome. So I just thought I'll divide my presentation. Mr. Prabhu has given you the broad brush picture of our engagement, but I would break it up into sort of 6 sections, my part. We'll talk about the current status, COVID, and the role of G20 in that context. Go on to talk about the exit plans, economic recovery, and then go on to talking about reviving global trade and investment, get on to reforms in the international financial architecture, then reach the penultimate section of India's role in all this, and then I'll just conclude with a few remarks. So I thought I'll structure it in that way. So we'll start with the first one, COVID and the role of G20. Of course, I begin with my heartfelt condolences for everyone who's been impacted by it. All people who are present, maybe knowing friends who have been hit by it and even otherwise. But I don't want to get into the figures. I think Mr. Bhasin and the earlier speakers, Rajat, spoke about it, about how the impact, what IMF has forecast. But the important point from our today's discussion is that the resource position of the countries resulting from this loss of income and the collapse of export revenues, drying up of capital markets, is going to be that there are going to be less funds for dealing with the priorities in the health sector. So the impact is going to be felt directly on that. So all those declines which IMF is talking about will be probably magnified in the declines to the budgets available in the health sector. So what could G20 do a role in this sense? I just thought about 3 different roles that G20 could critically play. Build an international consensus among countries in mitigating the short and long-term impacts, mobilizing resources, and sharing of technologies and expertise. So I just thought that those 3 broad areas that G20 could focus on. Of course, I have to commend, like the earlier speakers did, the role of G20 that they've already played in coordinating these efforts, which have just shown that, and one of the initiatives that was also referred to was the DSSI, the Debt Service Suspension Initiative. It's already shown that G20 is not just for its members, but it's actually there for the whole world. So it is sort of thinking on a global scale. So I'm also happy to note that all the G20 countries, they are sharing a common sort of vision and sentiments in terms of vaccine development, distribution, the international cooperation that is required for this, which will soon, in the next few weeks, become the critical issue as the vaccines come on stream. Of course, the limited supply of medicines and medical equipment was already present in most of the developing world, even before the COVID-19. So how that will get resolved is really going to be another issue that we'll have to see how ICT technology, infrastructure, and these sort of digital tools will become important. I think it was referred to by the earlier speakers also, to enable connectivity. And these will be really critical components in the development and the rollout of the vaccines. The other idea that I thought the G20 could look at focusing in terms of maybe supporting R&D, a common sort of R&D, they could consider maybe in terms of development of drugs and modern medical technologies for treatment of infectious diseases and SARS, coronaviruses and all that. So they could move in that direction. That could be a interesting initiative if they were to take it on. Of course, mobilizing funds through venture capital for helping startups like in the manufacture of ventilators. Again, these are just, I was getting into more specific cities. So, this section, I like to just end my first part of the presentation out of the 6 with talking about the strength of cooperation that Prime Minister Modi spoke about in March 2020 when he was addressing the virtual conference of this leaders, G20 leaders. I quote, the need to put human beings at the center of our vision of global prosperity and cooperation, freely and openly share the benefits of medical research and development, develop adaptive, responsive, and humane healthcare systems, promote new crisis management protocols and procedures for an interconnected global village, strengthen and reform intergovernmental organizations like WHO, and work together to reduce economic hardships resulting from COVID-19, particularly for the economically weak. He also urged, which I continue quoting, to help usher in a new globalization for the collective well-being of humankind and have multilateral fora focused on promoting the shared interests of humanity. So that sort of sums it up. Now I come to the second part, exit plans and economic recovery. I mean, this is further complicated by the escalating geopolitical tensions as we are all seeing what's happening around the world. And in addition, the environmental crisis, again referred to earlier, but just going a few months further back, the Amazon fires in Brazil, the Australian bushfires, and now the west coast of the United States, the Californian fires. So this just shows that, these sort of crises are not really constrained by any national boundaries. So it's not just the COVID, there are all these other issues that are sort of having cross-national impacts. So we need to be cognizant of that. And it really points to a need for a much more effective and coordinated national and global policy responses. So, it will really require on a global level, the policy responses. The other part here I wanted to talk about was how this COVID-19 has disrupted the efforts to attain the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I mean, it's really reversed years of progress that had been happened on every front, and several million people have been pushed back into poverty. So all the positive that had been achieved over the last few years is gone. But rather than looking at it as a dismal picture, I would look at it as an opportunity that it's not really to be missed if you want to use this to realign the national and global policies. So as the decade of action kicks in, I mean, this would be a good point to course correct and sort of see how we could do that. And because that's now a given, what's happened here, the effects of the pandemic. Also, the importance when we talk about economic recovery is the resilience of the financial system, which is very critical. And again, the requirement of joint action in that front also. So in that sense, there have been fiscal stimulus packages which have been launched and again being spoken about by earlier speakers. So that's good. I'll be talking about what India has done. So that is the second part of my presentation. I come to the third part, reviving global trade and investment. So the mobility barriers that have been introduced now have had such a tremendous impact. We've all seen it in terms of tourism, education, trade. So it's all sort of had pushed back on all these sectors. But since the inception of the G20, leaders have invariably sort of shown commitment to anti-protectionism, liberalization policies in order to promote this free, fair, non-discriminatory, transparent, predictable and stable trade and investment environment. But now, really time has come to act on it. I mean, there has been a lot of, we've all sort of spoken about it, expressed our sentiments in favor of this, but this is the time to actually act and rather than move inwards, as was talked about earlier. The other aspect in this section I want to mention is trade financing. So that needs to be extended and not just in general terms, particularly to the SMEs and sectors that have been are vulnerable. So that would be, we should not forget about that part of it, the trade financing. The last thing I wanted to mention here in this section was about restoring our confidence in the trading system. How would we do it? A cooperative approach, and we have the WTO. The effectiveness of the WTO, we need to enhance the effectiveness. And in fact, we are right in the middle of the selection of the new DG post for the WTO. So I hope that that sort of is the new DG is able to put things back on track. Of course, it will require a lot of support from all the member states of the WTO, and it will not just be up to the DG to be able to deliver on that. I come to the fourth part, reforms in the international financial architecture. This is an equally critical part in post-COVID-19 with the financial flows, both commercial and official assistance, which is going to be severely constrained. But what is important that, again, we should not lose sight of, we have done some sort of incomplete, but unfortunately ad hoc reforms of the voting rights in the IMF is being inefficiently done. So we'd advocate for more comprehensive reforms in that sector, including currencies of several other emerging markets, which are important in terms of, they could be included in the SDR. So these are issues that need to be looked at. And this is the right moment to sort of look at that. Moving on to development finance. Again, it is not only going to fall short of the needs. There is, I mean, we all know of the needs, but development finance, the G20 could easily propose mechanisms for pooling the development finance by MDBs and streamline crisis funding procedures. So we'll need to go into the granular detail and sort of see how it could be done. So, but once the direction is given, I'm sure things will move on. G20 also needs to reaffirm its commitment to prevent illicit financial flows, money laundering, fugitive economic offenders. So these are again sectors in this international financial architecture that I wanted to mention. The last part in this I wanted to refer to was the gaps in international taxation, especially the digital economy taxation. Here I'll mention our finance minister. She has emphatically stressed that this point in the G20 finance ministers meeting, and where the central bank governors were present, that we need a consensus-based approach, which should be simple, inclusive, and based on a robust economic impact assessment. The second part she mentioned was that this international finance cooperation, that opportunities for women, youth, SMEs, and other vulnerable sections of society need to be protected, and they need to be given their opportunities. So moving on from there, I come to what role India has played in this, my penultimate section, in terms of the current crisis and as fitting in with G20's overall response. On the medical front, we have donated medicines to more than 80 countries, value of over 75 crore rupees of drugs, test kits, and protective gear has already reached, it's gone. The second part is that we've also sent out rapid response teams, sent to Kuwait, Maldives. So we've sent out these teams. The third part, we have also proposing a SARC information exchange platform. So we're looking at that being set up. And another very critical part that we have done is organize programs on the web like this, eITech program, what we call iTech, where we've done 4 webinars for healthcare professionals. So several of our neighboring countries, countries in Africa, where I was in Nairobi, in Somalia, lots of healthcare professionals across the board logged in and benefited from these programs that we ran, 4 webinars. And these were actually run by super specialty medical institutes like All India Institute of Medical Sciences and PGI Chandigarh. So these were high quality, top of the line sort of programs that were run. So we did, this was India's one big role in the medical field that we did for our partner countries. The second part was the DSSI, debt service suspension, where we, 13 countries' requests have been received in the format that G20 gave out. 11 have already been approved, 11 countries. The other 2 will be soon approved. And we are receiving other requests, which will be processed as soon as they are complete. So we are moving ahead on the DSSI. The last part on India's role, we have implemented our economic package, 10% of GDP, US dollars 285 billion to mitigate human suffering. So that has been put on track. Direct benefit transfers, both in cash and kind, and employment guarantee schemes. I'll conclude. I mean, this really is a black swan event if there was ever one. I mean, I don't think we could have thought of anything beyond this. So this is, and it's brought out the need for cooperation at a global level. I mean, there's no way that this sort of pandemic is going to be sort of resolved without that sort of cooperation. So the world really needs to come together and get its priorities right. So if ever there was a wake-up call, I mean, this is it. It has arrived. So it's really time that we strengthen the basic foundations of our economy, all our economies, to get over these sort of uncertainties. So I'll just end with what Prime Minister recently, a few days back, said at the UN General Assembly on this issue. India's vaccine production delivery capacity will be used to help humanity in fighting COVID-19. This is not simply a gesture, rather it reflects the Indian value system that promotes peace and tolerance in the world. So this takes off on what Mr. Suresh Prabhu said, our Sherpa, that about human-centric development and our general concept of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. So I look forward to hearing from all of you during the course of the next few hours and learning about what else there is on this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chhabra, for your very substantive and significant intervention. I think you made some very, very good points. Especially, I mean, congratulations on the role that India has played in this process during the pandemic. As you mentioned, the role of rapid response teams, the seminars that India has been organizing, as well as the medicines that India has sent across countries. So congratulations and all the best for the role that you and the MEA will play in the lead up to the presidency in 2022. And, ICRIER stands by to provide any academic support that you may need. I think what you mentioned about, COVID, that it's disrupted and has really disrupted the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. And it couldn't be truer what you have said, but what you also sort of said in your remarks also was that this is an opportunity that we need to seize with both hands. As we know, India and several other countries reform domestically on the back of crisis. And we should definitely use this as an opportunity, both at the national level and at the global level. And I think India has a huge role to play in this as we sort of approach the 2020 presidency. And I think India has been able to gain both legitimacy and credibility at the international level. And what you say about R&D, using technology for developing vaccines and distribution of vaccine, what you say about taxation and consensus on digital taxation, these are issues that not only India, but the rest of the world is grappling with. And there could be no better time to try and enforce a cooperative agenda on the G20. And I think there will be much more appetite, depending on what the nature of the results are in elections, especially in the United States. I think the world will see a sort of a more cooperative agenda emerge in the next few years, because this is a pandemic that affects everybody. It does not isolate, just like climate change affects everybody. COVID has impacted everybody, as you said, Australia, the United States, Latin America, and of course, emerging markets like India have been devastated economically, and then the impacts of climate change can be equally devastating in the future. So I think the opportunity and the appetite for a more collective and cooperative agenda are there. And if all countries can come together, as you say, this would be a time to seize that moment. And I hope by the time our presidency comes, we'll have created that momentum. So all the best to you, and thank you so much for agreeing to participate in our conference. And I think the inaugural session has been really rich and enriched by you, by Suresh ji, and of course by Pramod, Bhasin. Now since I don't see any questions, I'm going to hand it over to Peter Rimmele, who is our collaborator and partner for the vote of thanks. I just want to preface my remarks by introducing Peter. This is the first time he is on ICRIER's platform, and I hope not the last, Peter. I hope this will be one of several events that will follow. He's currently the resident representative of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung office in India. He has a first law degree from Freiburg University, as well as a second law degree from the Ministry of Justice, Baden-Württemberg, Germany, and an MA in geography. MA in geography, right, Peter? Right? After working as a jurist, judge, and lecturer, he took public office as Ministeriat, head of division of the State Ministry of the Interior in Saxony, Germany, from November 1991 until 2000. There he served in the police and security and later in the local government department. On behalf of German Foreign Ministry, he served in East Timor as well as Registrar General, Head of Civil Registry and Notary Services, and became the principal advisor for government reform for GIZ, another government international cooperation institution in Germany. He has a vast experience, and I encourage you to all to go to our website and look at his vast resume and really varied experience. So Peter, let me hand it over to you for your vote of thanks. Peter, I can't hear you.
Still can't hear you, Peter. Maybe volume needs to go up.
No, is it possible now?
Yes, Peter.
Yes.
Okay.
You're loud and clear. You're loud and clear. Thank you.
Technical problem. Thank you. Shri Suresh Prabhu, Your Excellency, Dr. Fahad Almubarak, even if he could not join us, but with his video message, Mr. Rahul Chhabra, Mr. Pramod Bhasin, and Dr. Rajat Kathuria, members of this very distinguished digital audience, friends, ladies and gentlemen. We are living through times where the new is changing definition every day because of the extremely pacey dynamics of change in our everyday lives. And this is especially true in the field of multilateral international platforms, including the G20, about which we have been uniquely privileged to hear today from two notable Sherpas who bring not only years, but decades of wisdom, experiences, and acuity of vision to the table. And only Rajat could have put this together. It was indeed a marvelous way of setting the tone for this very well-timed and important conference. Our esteemed guest, Shri Suresh Prabhu, of course, has an inimitable way of articulating issues. Given his extensive experience in various ministries and other decision-making bodies. And it gives me great pride to say that Shri Prabhu is a great friend of Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. We have worked together in the past when he was extremely gracious to accept our invitation to head a delegation of prominent Indians to Geneva, Brussels, and Berlin some time ago, all to improve the issue of multilateralism and international cooperation. He's not just a great supporter of multilateralism himself, but an active player in advocating visionary changes so that all these platforms reflect the current reality and not the reality of a past long gone. My heartfelt thanks to you, sir, for bestowing your wisdom today on this very crucial event. Saudi Arabia, as we have heard, will host the G20 summit in November this year, and His Excellency Dr. Fahad Almubarak has made the agenda absolutely clear in his video message. To quote His Excellency the King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, we in the kingdom are undergoing a historic transformation under our Saudi Vision 2030 that aims to foster a vibrant society, thriving economy, and an ambitious nation. The kingdom will work with the G20 members to exchange experiences, solidify global cooperation, and find solutions for the world's most pressing challenges of the 21st centuries. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most noble and realistic endeavor, and we all know where these pressing challenges are emanating from. So I thank for sharing those messages, even if His Excellency could not be present with us. Mr. Rahul Chhabra, in his special address, was superbly articulate about the position of the government of India and the roadmap to its presidency in 2022. On behalf of all the organizers, please accept our heartfelt gratitude for enriching the conference and bringing in the official ground realities. Let me look a little bit into Europe. No matter which way the political pendulum swing in the European Union, it is obvious that Europe is in dire need of a multilateral and supranational approach And even beyond the current crisis, some argue that European economic policy must be harmonized more intensively in order to be able to further compete with much stronger players in Asia and the Americas. Around the world, due to the pandemic, we have witnessed a political knee-jerk reaction towards more autonomy and reducing reliance on foreign goods. Even Germany has announced that one of the tenets of Germany's EU Council presidency will be to repatriate important pharmaceutical production back to Europe. This is, I think, a sensible approach, as we can no longer rely on some international players to meet our demands in vital strategic goods, and it's maybe our version of Atmanya Bharata. But I would like to warn everyone who believes that now is the right time to send refuge in dreams of national self-dependence as an answer to this crisis, that these are really early days to declare multilateralism as a waning international force of cooperation and global good governance. So there is a pivotal role still to be played by supranational institutions like the G20, even if we have to admit that we cannot replace international trade and cooperation fully within our regions. But we cannot deny the strong forces even beyond the current crisis. And we are at work to change, they are at work to change the fundamentals of our world order. Whatever the outcome, and I believe we will hear some interesting ideas on what that might look like during the course of this conference, a return to the national sphere and with its solely bilateral approach cannot be in our interest. There still is a part, and hopefully an increasing part, to be played by entities like the UN, the G20, or the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm of the firm belief that multilateralism will emerge stronger and more deeply entrenched than ever before from this crucible of the COVID-19, and do not let any one nation or person let you believe anything to the contrary. And I think Rajat had the same expression in the beginning of his introduction, and Shri Suresh Prabhu put it in very simple words, but with a phenomenal logic. The sky is the same for all of us, and that would lead to more multilateralism to solve common problems together. I'd like to thank the speakers once again, as well as the wonderful audience presented and team ICRIER under the leadership of Mr. Pramod Bhasin and Dr. Rajat Kathuria for putting this great event together, wherein I'm looking forward to stimulating presentations and vibrant discussions. Last but foremost, I would like to dedicate this conference to the memory of the late Madam Isha Judge Ahluwalia, who is no more amongst us, but lives on in our collective memories, inspiring generations of past, present, and I think future economists in India and the rest of the world. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter, for those remarks. And I couldn't reinforce what you said more strongly, not only about multilateralism, but also of our former chairperson. We miss her, and as I said in my opening remarks, we will continue to celebrate her achievements, celebrate her life, and she has left an indelible mark on ICRIER. Thank you, Peter, really for saying that, and I thank once again on behalf of ICRIER, thank you, Peter, thank CAS, thank IMF, EDBI, and of course, Shri Suresh Prabhuji, and Mr. Rahul Chhabra for taking time and making what I think the inaugural session was a tremendous success. Pramod has had to leave because he has another phone call, but he has also thanked everybody on behalf of ICRIER for giving the time and making the inaugural such a wonderful success. We will all see you at 5 p.m. sharp for our session on evaluating global financial architecture and regulatory practices, progress, and the way forward. So see you at 5, and thank you all very much.